Okay, everybody, welcome to Suits and Laterals episode number 5. My name is Damian Bowman, and I am joined by my good friend out west, somewhere in the Bay of San Francisco or Oakland or somewhere where the earthquakes always are, Mr. Chris Green. How are you, sir?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for joining me today. We are without Jeff, who is starting the first day as the editor-in-chief of More Than a Fan. So Chris and I will guide you through the next 30 minutes of National Football League. So today we're going to talk. We're going to start with a few games from this past weekend, right, Chris?
Yep, absolutely.
All right. So let's start off with the Bills, and the most important thing about the Bills is that Rex Ryan has named free agent signee Tyrod Taylor as their starting quarterback. And I guess he was up against E.J. Manuel and Matt Castle, correct?
Yep.
So the question now becomes, Chris, which of the two is he going to keep as his backup?
Wow, and that's a good question. I mean, E.J. Manuel's the younger of the two, and he's been the starter for the last 2 years pretty much. So, I mean, you would think that based on track record, you'd probably go with E.J. Manuel, just because other than the 1 year Matt Castle had in New England, has he really done anything since then? I mean, he's kind of bounced around the league. And bounced over to Buffalo now, but neither one of them are anything special. I mean, I actually looked at the numbers, and A.J. Manuel surprisingly has better numbers than Castle. So I guess if you were going to keep one of the two, I'd say stick with him.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way just based on what you said. And E.J. Manuel had a pretty decent game on Saturday against the Steelers. So it would make sense for Rex Ryan to take E.J. Manuel to kind of, if nothing, just to kind of balance the mobile quarterbackness of Tyrod Taylor, right?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, nobody's ever... it's kind of surprising because I thought when E.J. Manuel came into the league that he was one of those mobile-type quarterbacks, but he really is not at all. He is, like you said, he's the complete opposite of Tyrod Taylor, but he's young, so I mean, there's still some chance that he could develop, even though he's already started 14 games in the last 2 years.
Yeah, and that's interesting, and I know you have the numbers, so I'm sure you'll give them to me here, but Tyrod Taylor's been in the league 5 years. He's 26, but he's been behind Joe Flacco the entire time. Do you know about how many passes he's thrown in those 5 seasons?
35.
35 passes, and any idea what the percentage is?
Yeah, 57% completion percentage. No touchdowns, 2 interceptions.
No touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So obviously the experience is not there. Because Flacco basically never got hurt, so he probably didn't have a whole lot of opportunities to play. So I guess the big question for him, being named starter, will be how long is it going to take for him to develop into an everyday starter, or what does he need to do to go through and get the rhythms and get all the cobwebs worked out?
Yeah, I mean, you never know when it comes to these quarterbacks who have been on the bench for years. I mean, you see them come out, and I mean, names come to mind. You've got Matt Castle, who was already in this. I mean, he had that great year for New England, but he hasn't done anything since then. I mean, back in the day, there was Scott Mitchell with Miami, who went up to Detroit on a big free agent contract and never did a thing with them. So Taylor didn't have the experience that both of those have gotten with their previous teams. So he's still a bit of an unknown. I mean, he hasn't done anything in the limited time he's had, but he also hasn't had any big experience to show that he can do anything either. So it's kind of a catch-22.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now let's take a look at the other side of this 43-19 matchup. The Steelers, very interesting evening for them. Michael Vick played to...
First pass, he throws a 63-yarder.
So in other words, he's the same old Michael Vick. Like, he didn't miss a beat at all.
No, I mean, he didn't show any rust, at least on that first pass.
The reaction has been interesting. I know this is a little different than what we usually talk about, but the reaction to the signing of Michael Vick in Pittsburgh is a little bit more polarizing than I thought it would be, considering all the history with Ben Roethlisberger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ironic, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of ironic. And I wasn't there, and I have no idea what happened with Roethlisberger, but obviously we know what happened with Vick. I mean, he pled guilty, and he did time in prison, and it's all out there. So it's very interesting to see that the fans were as vocal about Vick as they were.
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, I mean, it kind of makes you wonder. I mean, I'm not condoning what Vic did versus Animals versus what Roethlisberger allegedly did to some female fans or students or whatever they were, but um, I mean, you would think that they'd be in uproar about both, but you didn't hear a peep about Roethlisberger. They're out there backing him up the whole time, and then as soon as, I mean, Vic hasn't even played in a regular season game for them, and you've got this huge petition out there like, we don't want him here. It's crazy to me.
So how did Vic look over Landry Jones, who he's competing with for the backup job?
Do I even need to respond to that?
No, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay.
But
you and your Landry Jones love.
Hey, look, I just had to throw it out there. Just just in case maybe there was a shot. Maybe.
I'm sorry, any Landry Jones fans we may be offending.
All right. So the other news, though, from Saturday's game is that the Steelers potentially lost. So I don't know if it's season ending or how long Garrett Hartley's going to be out, but he hurt his hamstring on Saturday, and in fact, the Steelers traded with Jacksonville for Josh Scobie. I believe it was on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, whether the injury did him in or not, I think the trade did.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's very interesting that every week it seems like we have more and more injuries, and I don't know if this has ever happened, but I'm surprised that a team has lost 2 kickers in the preseason.
Yeah, 2 kickers in the preseason. I mean, yeah, you probably had a punter and a kicker maybe in a preseason, but I don't know if you've had the starting kicker and then the replacement for the starting kicker go down within the first 3 preseason games. That's definitely got to be one for the record books. I mean, it's possible it's happened, but usually those are the kind of injuries that happen during the season, not before it even starts.
So I should tell you that I just became a Philadelphia Eagles fan, and I am booking my ticket to the Super Bowl this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just changed my allegiance about 30 seconds ago.
Oh, okay. And why? What made you go and change your allegiance?
Double ACL tear. Sam Bradford had the best game in the preseason I've ever seen a quarterback have in about a year and a half.
Oh, I see. You were that whole 10 for 10 there. That sold you, huh? And
sold me.
Preseason. Oh, wow.
I'm booked.
Okay. Well, hey, that's one way to do it.
So, like you said, 10 for 10, and what, 3 touchdowns?
3 touchdowns, and actually, this will make you even more frothing at the mouth, so to speak. He's played 4 drives, and they've scored a touchdown on every one of them.
That's it. Every championship, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Scoreboard or whatever.
They don't even need to play the games. They can
That's
just
right.
go straight to the Super Bowl.
That's right. We're not even going to play. You could just pick your team from the AFC, whoever you want there, Chris. I don't care. You know what? Put your Browns in. That's fine.
That's the only way they're going to get there.
Okay, so what are the realistic expectations here for Sam Bradford? I mean, he hasn't played in 2 years. Like we just said, double ACL tear. Came back 10 for 10, 4 series. Obviously looked very good, but realistically, what should we be looking for from him next season?
If he can if he can make it to the playoffs, that'll be huge. I mean, the guy's had 3. I think he's had 3 tears total, 2 on one knee, 1 on the other, if I'm not mistaken. So if he can even get through the season, that'll be a big first step. But if he's healthy, Philadelphia definitely has a chance to make some noise. I mean, they haven't won a playoff game in Chip Kelly's first 2 years there.
Okay. So what if you're an Eagles fan, like a real Eagles fan, not like me who's the fake Eagles fan, and you are not crazy, jaded, EAGLES, Eagles, yeller and screamer at the bar that I have to deal with every week. What are your realistic expectations for this team in 2015?
I think they have a very real chance to make it in as the wild card at least. I don't know if I'm going to write Super Bowl. I mean, they did add DeMarco Murray, so I mean that's going to be but they did get rid of LaShawn McCoy too. So I think that trade-off will be pretty equal. But if Bradford plays the best year of his career, then they have a chance to go far. If his normal season happens and he's going to get hurt and they're going to be back to Mark Sanchez to lead him to the glory land. I mean, unless you're of the theory that Tim Tebow is going to come out of the woodwork and save the franchise.
I am not of that theory or persuasion or whatever. I don't.
Well, let me ask you this. Is he even going to make the team?
No.
Okay. I don't disagree with you at all there. I think he does himself a major disservice by the fact that he is unwilling to try anything but quarterback. I mean, there's been plenty of other people who've done it. I mean, you can look at Terrell Pryor with the Browns, but you know what? He's finally realized that if I want to make it in the NFL, I got to switch positions. And the guy hasn't even played this preseason, and I'd say there's a better than 50% chance that he's going to be on the roster.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Terrell Pryor is the best example, right, that we can think of, because obviously us being from Ohio and, you know, seeing a lot of Ohio State football, we know that Pryor, you know, was a serviceable quarterback in college football. You know, whatever you can say, whatever you want about him, but in the NFL, he was a disaster. I mean, I don't have another adjective to use there other than that one. So at least he was smart enough to know that in order for him to continue to get an NFL paycheck, he needed to at least make the effort to, you know, try a different position. And through that, you know, and if it works for the Browns, my guess is that he probably will make the team, is at the very least he is an emergency quarterback. And then that Browns can save a roster spot by not having to have another quarterback if they have Terrell Pryor who can play two positions.
Absolutely. I mean, it's roster flexibility. And I mean, obviously it was preseason and you still haven't seen him in a game, but I mean, you've heard pretty rave reviews about how he's done at receiver, at least in the practice portion. So will it translate to games? We don't know, but hey, I give the guy a lot of credit for making the effort. I mean, everybody knows he's a tremendous athlete. So if he can catch the ball and he can take a hit as a receiver, I think the sky's the limit for him.
Do you think the Packers are going to make the playoffs this year?
I don't doubt Aaron Rodgers. I mean, obviously losing Jordy Nelson was huge, and then with Randall Cobb going down, but it sounds like after the first reports that he may be done, it sounds like he actually may be okay for the first game, so that's big for them. But it's once again going to come down to the defense. Can the defense stop the other team's offense? Because as long as Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback, you're going to put up points. But if their defense has got to stop somebody first.
Is the Packers' path to the playoff easier than the Eagles' path?
I don't know, because you have Detroit, who's a pretty solid team, and I mean they added Haloti Noda, so that's. But they also lost Ndamukong Suh, so that'll be an interesting dynamic there to see how their defense reacts to that. But he also made a lot of stupid penalties for them, so that may help them in the long run. So I think that's their biggest competition in the Central, whereas it's really, I mean, you look at Philadelphia, they could have the Giants depending on how they play. The Cowboys should be right there. So, I mean, the Redskins, I wouldn't be worried about them at all, but you got those two, at least they're going to give them some competition.
You have anything else in the preseason, these two games, or anything else you want to add?
Well, the other thing we didn't get into real quick with the Steelers was they also found out they were going to lose Martavis Bryant for the first 4 games this year.
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
So that's another big blow to them. So they're going to have a tough start to the year, but I mean, they still have Roethlisberger at quarterback. They still have a pretty decent defense, so they may struggle early, and they're in a tough division, so anything's possible. But I suspect they'll be in the thick of it by the end of the year. Yeah, so we were talking about what teams are going to do this year, and then it's funny to say because nobody's played any games yet, but the other topic that always comes up is what coaches are on the hot seat right now. And you and I talked about some names, and I mean, the first name that kind of comes to mind is Gus Bradley of the Jaguars. So, I mean, Gus Bradley's been there. This will be his 3rd year. He's 7-25 in the 2 years he's there, and last year they got their supposed quarterback of the future in Blake Bortles, and he had a lot of rough spots, but I mean, that's typical of most rookie quarterbacks. So do you think he survives after this season, or what's it going to take for him to keep his job going into next year?
Well, I would say 8-8 is a good goal for them.
Sure. I mean, 3-13 last year, so.
Right. And I think that if he gets to 8-8 or anything close to that, I think he survives. But the reality of that team playing 8-8 this year is slim and none. And I think a lot of it has to do with the person you mentioned in your first sentence, Mr. Blake Bortles. And I'm not sure if he has enough weapons or enough patience to be able to get the ball to those weapons to help his team get to 8-8. In addition to that, right, Dante Fowler is gone for the year on the defense.
Yeah, another one of those crazy preseason injuries. He didn't even make it to the preseason.
Exactly, and I think that actually might be the biggest detriment to them getting to 8-8, more so than Blake Bortles is.
Well, does that buy him any extra time, though? Because, he didn't injure the guy, so, he can only play with the hand he's dealt.
Sure, I understand he didn't run over him with his Lexus, but, there's still got to be somebody who can at least do a serviceable job in that position, right? It's the NFL, so, people are going to get cut this week and next week, and there's got to be somebody who is available either through trade or a free agent signing or whatever that can do a serviceable job in that position. But if Bortles can't play well and whoever they get to fill this is not good enough, then I think at some point you have to go, I don't think it's going to work. And like I told you before we started this, until I saw his name on this list, I'd never even heard of this guy. And I think that when you have a name, I think that buys you more time than not having a name and having 50 injuries.
Sure. That makes perfect sense. And that's somebody we'll talk about here in a couple of minutes, a name coach who's kind of on the hot seat. But before we get to them, let's look at Joe Philbin of the Dolphins. So Joe Philbin is pretty much the annual 8-8 coach, it seems. He's 23-25 in 3 years. They were 8-8 last year. He's got Ryan Tannehill as his quarterback. Tannehill came into the NFL, and he was thought of as one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in that draft. That was the year RG3 and Andrew Luck and Brandon Weeden and him all came out. And he struggled early on, but he's kind of come on in the last 2 years. So is Ryan Tannehill going to save his job, or the free agent, them adding Ndamukong Suh on that defense? Do you think they can move up from that 8-8, or is he sitting there looking at another 500 season and on the side looking for a new job next year?
Well, I think the best thing for him is the division that he plays in. And I think the best team in that division is the one, well, I lied. Obviously, there's 2 very good teams in that division. But I think the one that's going to play spoiler this year is the one that we talked about earlier, and that's the Buffalo Bills. And I think since we obviously don't know what's going on with Tom Brady, I don't know what's going to happen with New England in those first 4 games. But you would think that Ndamukong Suh and Ryan Tannehill and Cameron and Devontae Parker would be able to push this team beyond 8-8.
Yeah, absolutely. It's if they have a bit of a soft schedule early on. I don't have their schedule right in front of me, but like I said, if New England's kind of behind the 8 ball with Brady, we'll find out about that sometime probably by the end of this week. But Buffalo is. Really, their defense got them there last year. It wasn't anything to do with the offense. So, and we talked about the new offense there and what Rex Ryan could possibly do. That's their biggest threats. Nobody's expecting the Jets to hop in front of them, but there's no excuses at this point. Philbin, I feel like he's been on the hot seat each of the last 2 seasons, and he's still somehow survived. But I think this is definitely his make or break year.
I agree with you 100%. And he's perennial on the hot seat, like somebody else we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. But Philbin's goal has to be to get to the playoff, wild card or bust. That's the only way that he survives, I think.
Absolutely. So moving along, while we're in the state of Florida, just up the road a bit is Lovie Smith. So Lovie's in his 2nd year down in Tampa, and he's got a brand new quarterback this year. He can't blame everything on Josh McCown. So is Jameis Winston going to be his savior, or is he going to take him down?
Well, based on what I saw at Jameis Winston on Saturday, which, by the way, I was at Put-in Bay, which is the islands up in Ohio, which if nobody's ever been, I highly recommend it. Jameis Winston's not going to be a savior this year.
Well, and most rookies aren't.
Yeah, well, I think, I understand you got to play the kid, but he did not look good against the Browns. Like I said, I was about 50 drinks in, but I could tell you from what I saw with one eye that Jameis Winston did not look like he had a good day. So I don't know what Winston's been doing the other 2 preseason games or whatever, but I would say that the dress rehearsal did not go well for him.
Well, no, he spent more time on his back in that game than he did upright, that's for sure.
Right, and that's part of the problem. So what do you think the expectation is for and I know we talked about this a few weeks ago, but in order for Smith to keep his job, what do you think that this team has to do? Or does it matter because they have a new quarterback?
I think he'll get another year regardless. I mean, the ownership group there is not always has traditionally given their coaches some time, and they have a rookie quarterback. So unless this whole thing flames out and they decide to blame it all on Lovey, I think he'll be there at least one more year. I mean, he's been a Tampa guy for years, despite the fact that he was with the Bears, and I mean, he's got a little bit of a pedigree from his Super Bowl trips in Chicago. So I think he's that name coach that you just mentioned. So I think he'll get a little bit more time as opposed to somebody like Gus Bradley.
That's a fair point.
So, and then moving on to another name coach would be Jeff Fisher with the Rams. So, and he's an interesting story. I mean, they've made some moves this year where they got rid of Sam Bradford, of course, and they brought in Nick Foles in that trade. So, and Nick Foles is more likely to stay upright than Bradford did while he was there. So, there's a good chance they have some much better offensive showing, I would think, this year. I mean, their defense has been pretty strong the last 2 years, but he's been under 500 his whole time in St. Louis so far, either at or below. He was 6-10 last year. He's 20-27 since he's been there. And this isn't Tennessee where he was there as a player before he was a coach and all of that. So, and there's also the upheaval of them possibly moving this year. So at this point, I mean, he's definitely on the hot seat, but do you think he's got to get to the playoffs to keep his job, or is his name going to save him too?
This is an interesting one because I don't know if his name saves him, but I think maybe the specter of them moving saves him. And you
don't think that they're going to want to have a big splash? We're moving to LA or wherever, and we want to get a big name coach in there to drop the excitement. I mean, Jeff Fisher's a pretty well-known coach, but I mean, in all honesty, he hasn't done anything in quite some time.
Well, the thing is we don't know if they're necessarily going to go to LA right now.
True.
So I think if their stadium was built and we knew that's where they're going, then yeah, he's basically Bill Belichick on the Browns. I think that's a fair comparison there. But the problem is that this team has lost or had a losing record 10 consecutive seasons, and there's so much talent on this team, and Jeff Fisher has basically done nothing with it. And I don't even know, and again, we talk about named coaches, but what is this, his fourth year with the Rams? Yeah. So I think after 4 years, if he can't get them to the playoffs, no matter what.
No, actually, this will be his fifth year.
Yeah. Then I think it's do or die time for him. And I don't think if he can get to the team, if he doesn't get the team in the playoffs, he's out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes complete sense to me. So now those are the names that come up the most, and I mean, this next name is somebody who comes up. It seems like every year, and we talked about him previously, but Tom Coughlin with the Giants. So Tom Coughlin's been with the Giants for quite some time. I don't know his career record's 96-80. He has 2 Super Bowl wins to his credit already. And every year he's sitting around that 9-7, 8-8. The last year they were 6-10. So, and you, Jeff, and I brought this up earlier, is you kind of wonder, should he be on the hot seat? Should he not be on the hot seat? He tends to have his best seasons when he's on the hot seat. So does he have to make another Super Bowl run to keep his job, or is this going to be kind of his swan song into retirement?
Well, he's 68. And I think that's a thing that a lot of people forget about. And if it weren't for an excellent December, or a remarkable December, I guess, he'd probably be out of a job doing whatever retired or should be retired NFL coaches do. I guess for him, you have to wonder, if you're him, at what point do you say, I've done everything I can do.
Enough's enough.
Yeah. Enough is enough. These people are not going to be grateful unless we're going to the Super Bowl every year. Guess what? We play in probably the toughest division in football, and it's just not going to happen. So maybe he should take himself out of it. Now, that said, he does have a 1-year extension. He has a contract through this year and then through 2016. But as I mentioned to you earlier, before we started, that might only be to save face and avoid the specter of dealing with contract negotiations through the season. So I don't know what the Giants are going to do, but if I were him and I thought I could walk out of here my own way with my head held high, I'd do it.
Yeah, I think ideally it would be going out with a Super Bowl win. I don't see that for them this year. So I think if he could just go out maybe either 500 or better, I could see this being his last season. I mean, he's kind of had his run, and I just don't know that team's going to go far enough to really do anything at this point.
Do you think that they push him out?
I think that they would encourage him, but I don't know that they would pull the trigger unless they have a terrible season, just because he's got that respect and build up from his 2 Super Bowl wins. So the other name on there is Chuck Pagano. Now, and you just talked about they just gave him that 1-year extension into 2016. Now, Indianapolis offered him a 1-year deal, and he turned it down. So his contract's actually up at the end of the season. He didn't want. He wants to. They couldn't come up to it with an accord that would work for him and them on both sides. So does he have to win a Super Bowl at this point? I mean, they were in the AFC Championship game last year. So do they have to win the Super Bowl for him to get an extension? Or, I mean, it's kind of surprising to say a coach is 33-15 in 3 years and is on the hot seat.
Well, this is the most surprising name on the hot seat, or at least the ones that we've talked about, just based on what you said. I mean, they were in the AFC Championship game last year. He's 33-15. This is his 4th year. The previous 3 years, obviously, 2 years he coached very well, and then the 1 year, obviously, he was sick. And he's worked through all that, and he seems to be well-liked in the city. I think maybe a lot of the question is around, is it, and this is crazy, right? But is it his team, or is it still kind of like, are these people still kind of living in the Peyton Manning era, or what? Like, why is this even a question to me? And I can kind of understand maybe the Colts don't want to spend the money that he thinks he deserves, but I'm surprised that they couldn't come up with a number this offseason that was amenable to both parties.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, what are the Colts front office? Are they looking at it as, well, he's got Andrew Luck, so he should already have been in the Super Bowl? Or is it the fact that, he was a defensive guy brought in, and their defense has been atrocious since he's been there? I mean, last year they were 19th in points allowed, and I mean, most games it was Andrew Luck had to outscore the other team in order for them to win. Yeah,
I don't know. I guess if I am whoever the owner of the Colts is, I can't think of the guy's name.
Jim Irsay.
Yeah, but okay. I guess I should have known his name. I would give him. I wouldn't give him whatever he wanted and just be done with it. But I would have to think about, if not him, then who.
Yep.
And I think that kind of answers the question, because if you in your relationship with Pagano, where do you go?
Yeah, I mean, and it's like, do you want to be the guy that cans the guy who's been battling cancer, and like I said, he's got the 33-15 record, but I mean, Irsay is nothing if not controversial.
Sure, and I understand that, and I think that and I know you just brought that up as a talking point, but I think if anybody says, "Oh, you can't fire him because he had cancer and they worked through it," that means nothing. I mean, this is business we're talking about here, and if Irsay is saying legitimately, "I'm firing him based on his lack of performance," and yes, obviously we stood by him while he was sick, and we obviously hope that he's well, I think that's a poor angle of attack that anybody would take.
It's a tough call. That's what I said. He's the one surprising name that I saw it on all the lists we looked at. His name is on there. So I think it's more a product of the contract situation. Because, I mean, he's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. So maybe he doesn't want to be there. Maybe he wants to see if there's another job out there he wants where he feels like he's getting the respect he deserves.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, maybe he wants to go to San Francisco or Cleveland or, I don't know, the Giants or somewhere where he's going to get more money and maybe get a little bit more respect, like you said.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, everybody, that's it. Episode 5 of Suits and Laterals. You can find this and all the other shows at fourlights.fm/shows. This podcast is available on Stitcher, iTunes, Zune Marketplace, BlackBerry World, and SoundCloud. Chris and Jeff will be back next week. I'm Damian Bowman. For Chris Green, thanks again. Have a great night.
One more week to real games.